This set of talks is going to be about the nature of the Trinity. And we decided to do this because a lot of the basics of understanding the nature of God has gotten very fuzzy and become a real problem. And as I'm noticing, as I'm teaching and looking at discussions on the internet, that a lot of this teaching, a lot of older understandings in that has become a real problem, and there's a lack of understanding of that. Now we're going to start with basically an introduction. Universal truth has been a pursuit of mankind for thousands of years. How to get in touch with God and find God has been a journey for mankind for thousands of years. And the understanding of universals was being sought by the Greeks and the Egyptians and the Romans. I mean, we have been seeking out God for a long time. There's philosophies out there that see everything as one. There's, having a monistic worldview, like in Hinduism or Buddhism. They have a worldview that has a universal, but they don't have a way to describe particulars. How do you describe how there are individuals? How do you describe that there are particulars in this universal monistic worldview, like in Hinduism? When it comes down to both Hinduism and Buddhism, the final analysis is that everything really comes down to nothing. Because when all truth is consumed into one thing, that one thing just kind of dissolves the particulars. And so you have no way of describing particulars in that sense. And so unity and diversity has always been a problem. Another problem that the world has sought after is how to explain morality and human behavior. And that problem has to do with particulars. I mean, you can have a worldview where everything is seen as part of creation, and everything kind of like in the life cycle, everything consumes everything else, and in the end, consumption becomes the end result. And so when you have that kind of a worldview, how to honor individuality becomes a real problem. And you have to be able to explain universals, but you also have to explain how you get particulars out of universals. And monistic worldviews don't do that. And because they can't do that, they can't explain how to behave. Because if everything is one and everything ends up basically in some kind of annihilation of individuality, then really it doesn't matter how one thing treats another thing. Because once you've been eaten, you just become part of the one anyway. And so it doesn't matter how you behave. And so these kind of worldviews, they set up a false standard of classification. So you still haven't solved either the problem of universals or the problem of human behavior. But the other thing that we've sought after is immortality. And why, the big questions are, why are we here? And where are we going from here? Why is man even created? Why are we even on the planet? Why isn't the planet just rocks or at least plants, And so we don't have, we want to mankind's always struggling to answer those questions, is these bigger questions. And evolution and scientism does not answer those questions. It can give you methods of how things change, but it doesn't explain why we're here in the first place. And so we have different worldviews trying to answer the bigger questions. And a lot of temptation is to just dismiss them and say there is no answer. But even that becomes a problem too, because it has no way to explain why people behave. And people don't really believe that anyway. I mean, when you tromp on their rights, or when you take away their possessions or you touch their lives, then all of a sudden morality means something to them. and the big questions of why are we here and how should we behave towards one another becomes relevant, especially when it concerns them. How do we discover universals? And this is a question of epistemology, or the philosophy of knowledge. How do we know certain things? I think there's those kinds of things have been discussed for a long time, and I think they're really have some simple solutions. There's rational knowledge, that's logic and math and those kinds of things, and you can question rational knowledge, or logical knowledge, but in order to question it, you have to assume that it's true. And once you assume it's true, then you've contradicted the fact that you're questioning it. So it's really self-evident that rational logic and math are true ways of understanding things. But another way we understand things is through observation. And now we've gone through a couple of 100 years of where empirical knowledge, people say, well, empirical knowledge is the only knowledge that has any relevance whatsoever. But we've seen scientists or empirical thinkers really make some really bad mistakes logically, and they're making irrational statements. And so we know that pure empirical knowledge through experience also has its limitations. But do we drop that? Because we know it has limitations, do we get rid of it? No, because then things become self-contradictory. And you say, well, how does that become self-contradictory? Well, I'm teaching on it, and you have to hear what I'm teaching or listen to what I'm saying. And so if you don't trust what I'm saying, the only way to know what I'm saying is through empirical knowledge, through the senses of visual and auditory information. And you have to trust that what I'm saying is the same thing you're hearing. If you're going to count things by using mathematics, you have to at least see what you're counting, or have some kind of empirical knowledge of what you're looking at. And so empiricism cannot be dropped out of the picture just because it has some flaws in it. It too is self-evident. But there's a third kind of knowledge. And because we're talking about the nature of God, we have to go here. And that is knowledge that comes to us through other beings. Like you might tell me something, you might give me some information that I cannot get through logic and through rationalism. I cannot get through observation. Now, that kind of knowledge is very valid. The only way some things can be known is through revelation, especially when it comes to personal knowledge. If I want to know how you feel about something, or what you like, or what you really are passionate about, the only way I can know that is if you tell me. It's through a revelation, a revealing of who you are as a person. Now, so we have three kinds of knowledge. We have rational knowledge, we have empirical knowledge, and we have revelational knowledge. When we talk about the nature of God, we have to use all three. The big problem is to find what we favor, like we might favor pure logic. And then we take pure logic and we lock it up in a box, and we say that there's no other knowledge other than pure logic. But you can't know things exist outside of the box unless you get outside the box. You have to allow yourself to receive knowledge other than rationalism. Now, that doesn't get rid of rationalism, because your other option is irrationalism, and we don't want to do that. You don't want an irrational worldview, but you do want a rational one, but it also has to have a rational one that agrees with what we perceive, what we see. But if we want to know knowledge of each other, of persons, then we have to also accept that knowledge has to come to us from them directly. And it has to be revealed to us. Unless they tell us something about themselves, we won't know that. No matter how rational we are, no matter how much we observe, there's some things we cannot know unless someone tells us or reveals to us what that is. It's just like if your grandma makes a pie, and you can take the pie into the laboratory, and you can tear the pie apart, and you can do all kinds of experiments on it, and you can describe the pie strictly according to chemical scientific knowledge. But that doesn't tell you how the pie tastes. It doesn't tell you whether you like the pie. It doesn't tell you even why Grandma made the pie. And the only way you'll know what the pie's like is that if you taste it. And the only way you're going to know why Grandma made the pie is if she tells you. So there's 3 kinds of knowledge. And when we talk about the nature of God, we're going to have to talk about all 3 kinds of knowing. And because you cannot know God unless God wants you to know him.